Well, I guess I'll give you a warning first. Long video. This is the panel of my 1976 PA32. I've had it for about 2 years and done a fair amount of updates to the panel. I had a rule of mine that I said, okay, if I'm looking at airplane safety, what are the number one causes of crashes? Obviously, CFIT, controlled flight into terrain, running out of fuel, spatial disorientation. Those are what seem to be like 80% of all crashes. So for me, that became number one priority of how do I eliminate those? So when I first bought the plane, first thing I did was I pulled out the 430, put in the 440W, worth every penny. The integration to an iPad, so I keep an iPad here so my co-pilot can call out traffic, etc. The ability of that to be able to sync over, the hard button and touchscreen interface. I will say my one complaint is that the display is actually, although it's wider than a 430, it is a little bit squishy, or at least has the appearance of not being as tall as a 430. And one thing that I really have a problem with on the 440, on 4Flight, any of these navigation type, bird's eye view views, the problem is that they always show the airplane in the center. And I always found that odd because in reality, we're traveling at 150 or 200 knots. So we really need to be more concerned about what's in front of us, not what's behind us. So I've often been a little bit confused as to why, especially on a display like the 440 that's kind of squished, it would be really nice if instead you could bias it so that you would actually be offset like 30%. So that then you'd get 70% of your view in front of you, 30% of the view behind you. But, quibbles here and there. So that was the first thing I did. Next, I did an engine monitor. I put in the dual EI, incredible piece. I'll go ahead and I'll do a separate video on those, but did the dual EI in the fall. That would have been the fall about a year and a half ago was when that was done. Worth every penny. If you don't have one, get one. Getting rid of legacy instruments, being able to get a certified one so all of my analog instruments went away, having fuel precision, having manifold precision, having fuel flow. One of the biggest things I like is it actually then pushes to my 440 and gives me miles per gallon. To clarify, the GTX 345 transponder was already there. I've kept that. It pairs great with my mobile devices and with the 440 to give me traffic, etc. It also, when I purchased it, it did come with the Aspen. I've been very happy with it. Aspen seemed to be a love-hate. Some people think they're amazing, like myself. For me, I like all of the hard buttons that are included in Aspen. I like being able to click and turn knobs and hit barrow. I like being able to do that stuff without looking. For me also, because I typically fly with people that aren't pilots, it's nice to be able to touch the screen to point things out, point out airspeed, point out elevation, etc., without it going and doing page turns or anything like that. So I'm actually a big fan of that. So as part of my overhaul update, the overhaul included a couple specific things. One was elimination of my vacuum system. So by eliminating my vacuum system, then that created a series of cascading problems, which when I talk, if you haven't watched my power plant video, I mentioned it in that then your project kind of goes from this to this as you start pulling on a thread. So since I went down early December 2022 for the overhaul, that's when I started first all the demo. So I worked with my A&P to remove all of the legacy wiring and everything. We had the storm scope in the back. Its actual display was down here. We pulled that out. We pulled out all the wiring, pulled out the left side to get out all that wiring. Also just did a ton of cleanup under the panel. There was still light bulbs shoved back in there from the old analog gauges. It was just a mess. So pulled out a bunch of that. Here's a screenshot, or here's a shot of all the wiring that we pulled out. Okay, so then after we got all that out, then it became, okay, what do I need to do on instrumentation if I'm pulling out my vacuum system? So that is not in this video. There's a separate video on that because that is exclusive to Aspen. So look for the other video on Aspen and avionics to see what we did there. So as part of this update, I went through, vacuum system went out, so a lot of the other functionality went away in here. I shouldn't say went away, a lot of the other functionality in regard to stuff, all that old wiring. As part of the update, The only legacy instruments I did have to keep were my airspeed and altimeter. So I do still have those two instruments, but everything else is gone. Everything else is digital. And I will say respectfully, I don't even look at these because I have airspeed altimeter here and airspeed altimeter on my avionics. Then what I did was, and if you can kind of see it in the video, I then did a carbon fiber overlay. The problem was this panel was so cut up for being 45, 47 years old that there was holes and screws and everything everywhere. So if you want to do one of these, it's actually quite easy. It's a sheet of ABS, so it's just ABS plastic, and then a carbon fiber overlay, which I use from a local wrap shop. So they went ahead and did the cover. What I started with was basically a sheet of paper. I took a piece of long paper, stretched it out, got that kind of close, then used that to template onto the ABS, which is 080 is the thickness, so just under 1/10 of an inch. I did that across here and then just played around with it each time. This ABS is so cheap, you can buy enough to do 4 or 5 panels for about 35 or 40 bucks. So I would literally go through and make one, cut all the holes, put it up there, and then go draw on here with a silver Sharpie and go, okay, this one needs to move down 1/8 of an inch. This one needs to move over 1/8 of an inch. Use hole saws to cut the holes, vibratory cutter to cut the straight lines, and I have one solid panel. Just got some regular stainless screws with some nice little grommets, and I'm done. I really like it because it allows me flexibility down the road without having to go through and change everything. So I've been really happy with that. Then on this bottom part, I was trying to figure out what to do down here after we ripped out all the gauges. I didn't like the stock plastic that was there. So on that one, what we did was I actually got 030 ABS, so thinner, and then actually shaved the edge of it. So the edge of it is actually at a 45, and that's what tucks into these grooves. So these are actually installed by simply bending them out a little bit, and then they snap in. I did the same thing there. I just had those covered in carbon fiber. I think they charged me 80 bucks to do the entire thing in the carbon fiber wrap. And I think it just gives it a nice look. It's not complicated. It's easy. And if I ever want to change it, it's quite easy. We're then going to go through and do the bottom 2 panels. That one's just a little bit more complicated, so that's maybe next year. But that's my new panel. I've been really happy with it. It works well. I've kept the legacy radio. Should it go? Maybe, but it works fine. So I have no reason to get rid of it. I did replace the comm panel to try and address a squeak or a clicking I had. Turned out it was actually just my turn coordinator. But by adding that, I did get Bluetooth, which is a nice feature. Oh, sidebar. If you get one of these PS Engineering pieces as Bluetooth, the problem is that you cannot end the call without touching the button on your phone. So it makes it kind of difficult to actually end a phone call because there's no way to actually end it unless you grab your phone. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to mount a little piece right here that gives me a Bluetooth call and end button that will pair directly to my phone. And that's my new panel.